The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered general store, and Katherine Bennett felt her heart hammer against her ribs so hard she thought it might burst right through her carefully mended traveling dress. Dust swirled around the wheels as she pressed her gloved hand against the window, peering out at Gunnison, Colorado, the town that would become her home whether she liked it or not. The year was 1881, and she had traveled over 1,000 miles from Boston to marry a man whose face she had seen only in a single faded photograph. The driver opened the door, and Katherine forced herself to step down onto the wooden platform, her legs trembling beneath her skirts. The afternoon sun blazed overhead, nothing like the gentle New England summers she had known all her life. Everything here seemed bigger, harsher, more unforgiving. Mountains rose in the distance like ancient sentinels, and the wind carried the scent of sage and something wild she could not name. She clutched her worn carpetbag and looked around the dusty street. A handful of people went about their business, barely sparing her a glance. A woman in a simple calico dress hurried past with a basket of laundry. Two men stood outside what appeared to be a saloon, their conversation stopping as they noticed her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, completely out of place in her city clothes and proper hat. "Miss Bennett." The voice was deep, hesitant, and Katherine spun around to face the man who had spoken. He stood a few feet away, hat in his hands, tall and lean with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that fell nearly to his collar. His eyes were the color of whiskey in sunlight, and they held an expression she had not expected, fear that mirrored her own. "Yes," she managed, her throat dry. "Are you Ashton Palmer?" "I am, madam." He took a step closer, then seemed to think better of it and stopped. "Welcome to Gunnison. I hope the journey was not too difficult." Katherine wanted to laugh at the understatement. 3 weeks of rattling trains and bumpy stage coaches, sleeping in questionable hotels, eating food that sat like stones in her stomach, watching the landscape change from familiar to foreign with each passing mile. But she simply nodded. "It was manageable, thank you." They stood there in awkward silence, two strangers bound by letters and desperation. Katherine had answered his advertisement out of necessity after her father's death left her penniless, and her stepmother made it clear she was no longer welcome in the only home she had ever known. Ashton had written simple, honest letters about his ranch and his need for a wife to help build a life with him. Nothing flowery, nothing false, just plain facts. Now, seeing him in person, she realized how little words on paper could convey. He was younger than she had imagined, perhaps 26 or 27 to her 22 years. Work hardened, certainly, with the kind of strength that came from years of physical labor. But there was something gentle in the way he held himself, as though he was afraid of frightening her. "I have a wagon just over here," Ashton said, gesturing toward a sturdy buckboard hitched to 2 horses. "The ranch is about 6 miles outside of town. We can stop by the mercantile first if you need anything." "I would appreciate that," Katherine said, grateful for the practical suggestion. She had brought what little she could, but she knew it would not be enough for life out here. Ashton took her bag, handling it carefully as though it contained precious china rather than her meager possessions. He helped her onto the wagon seat, and Katherine noticed the calluses on his hands, the way his fingers were gentle despite their rough appearance. He climbed up beside her but left a respectful distance between them. The mercantile was dim and crowded with goods, everything from farming equipment to bolts of fabric. The proprietor, a heavy-set man with mutton-chop whiskers, greeted Ashton with familiarity. "Palmer, this the bride you have been expecting?" "This is Miss Bennett, yes," Ashton said quietly. "She will need some things for the ranch." Katherine moved through the store, overwhelmed by the choices and her own uncertainty about what she would actually need. She had grown up in a city, in a house with servants, before her father lost everything in bad investments. She knew how to embroider and play the pianoforte and make polite conversation at dinner parties, but she knew nothing about surviving in this vast, empty country. "Madam," Ashton appeared at her elbow, holding a list written in careful, blocky handwriting. "I took the liberty of making some suggestions, if that is all right. Practical things you might need, but please add anything you want." Katherine took the list and scanned it. Sturdy boots, work dresses, a warm coat, gloves, basic sewing supplies, seeds for a kitchen garden. Nothing frivolous, nothing pretty, just survival. A lump formed in her throat, but she swallowed it down. This was her life now. There was no point in mourning what she had lost. "This is very thoughtful," she said. "Thank you." They spent the next hour gathering supplies. Ashton paid for everything without comment, though Katherine noticed how carefully he counted the bills from his worn leather wallet. Money was clearly not plentiful, and guilt twisted in her stomach at the expense she represented. As they loaded the parcels into the wagon, Katherine caught sight of her reflection in the mercantile window. She looked pale and tired, her dark hair already escaping its pins, her blue eyes too large in her thin face. What must this man think of her? She was not the sturdy frontier woman he probably needed. She was a city girl who had never mucked out a stall or churned butter, or any of the 100 other tasks that surely filled the days out here. The ride to the ranch was quiet except for the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. The landscape rolled past, endless and open in a way that made Katherine feel simultaneously free and terrified. There were no buildings, no neighbors, no signs of civilization except for the rutted road they followed. "It is beautiful," she said finally, because it was true even if it scared her. Ashton glanced at her, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "You think so?" "Most folks from back east find it too empty." "It is empty," Katherine admitted, "but there is something about it, all this space, all this sky, it makes you feel very small." "Yes, madam, it does." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I know this is not what you are used to. I know this is probably frightening for you, but I want you to know something." Katherine turned to look at him fully, and he met her gaze with those serious amber eyes. "I will earn your trust daily," he said simply. "I know you do not know me. I know you took a leap of faith coming here, and I know you are scared. But I will work every day to show you that you are safe with me, that you can trust me. I will not force anything. I will not rush you. We will take this as slow as you need." The sincerity in his voice made tears prick at Katherine's eyes. She had expected many things from this arrangement, but genuine kindness had not been among them. She had braced herself for demands, for expectations she did not know how to meet. But here was this stranger promising her time and patience. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will try to be a good wife to you." "I am not worried about that," Ashton said. "I just want you to be happy, or at least not miserable." Katherine almost smiled at that. Not miserable sounds like a reasonable goal. The ranch appeared in the distance, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley with a creek running through it. The main house was small but solid, built of logs with a stone chimney. There was a barn, a chicken coop, a few other outbuildings she could not identify. Cattle grazed in the near pasture and horses moved in the corral. "It is not much," Ashton said, and Katherine could hear the apology in his voice. "But it is mine, clear and paid for. No debts. The land is good, the water is reliable. With hard work and some luck it will prosper." "It looks perfect," Katherine said, and meant it. After the chaos of her father's financial collapse, the shame of charity from relatives who resented every penny spent on her, the idea of a place that was solid and debt-free sounded like paradise. Ashton helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag to the house. The inside was clean but sparse, furnished with handmade furniture that showed more function than artistry. There was a main room with a fireplace and table, a small kitchen area, and 2 doors leading to what must be bedrooms. "I have been sleeping in the barn," Ashton said quickly. "The main bedroom is yours. I will not intrude on your privacy until you are ready, if you are ever ready. There is no rush, no pressure." Katherine looked at him, this man who was legally her husband as of the proxy marriage arranged through their letters, and felt something shift in her chest. He was giving her a choice, a precious commodity she had not had in a very long time. "You do not have to sleep in the barn," she said carefully. "Perhaps we could start with separate rooms and see how things go." Relief washed over his face. "That would be fine. That would be more than fine." "Thank you." He showed her around the house, pointing out where things were kept, apologizing for the lack of feminine touches. "I am not much for decoration," he said. "But if you want to fix things up, make it more home-like, please do. This is your house now, too." Katherine set her bag in the bedroom and looked around at the simple space. A bed with a log frame and what appeared to be a new quilt, a dresser, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, a small mirror on the wall. A window looked out over the valley and late afternoon light streamed through the clean glass. "May I ask you something?" Katherine turned to find Ashton standing in the doorway, careful not to enter without invitation. "Of course. What made you decide to come west, to answer my advertisement? You seem like an educated woman, well-bred. You must have had other options." Katherine sank down onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. "My father died 6 months ago. He left nothing but debts. My stepmother remarried quickly and made it clear I was not welcome to stay. My options were to find work, which is nearly impossible for a woman of my limited practical skills, to impose on relatives who had already made their resentment clear, or to marry. Your advertisement seemed honest. You did not promise riches or an easy life. You just offered partnership and a fresh start. That was more than anyone else was offering." Ashton nodded slowly. "My situation is similar, I suppose. I came west 5 years ago with nothing, worked other men's ranches until I could buy this place. I have built something here, but it is lonely. I wanted a partner, someone to share the work and the life. I tried courting local girls, but—" He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "But what?" "But they all saw through me, I guess. Saw that I am just a cowboy with dirt under my nails and big dreams that might not amount to anything. I am not smooth or charming. I do not know how to talk pretty to women. I figured maybe someone from back east, someone who needed a fresh start as much as I did, might be willing to take a chance." "I am glad you placed that advertisement," Katherine said softly. "I think we might be able to help each other." "I hope so, madam. I surely hope so." That night, Katherine lay in the unfamiliar bed and listened to the sounds of this new world. Wind whispering through the valley, the distant lowing of cattle, an owl hooting somewhere in the darkness. She thought about Ashton, who had eaten dinner with her at the rough-hewn table, making awkward conversation about the ranch and the weather and the neighbors she would eventually meet. He had cleaned up the dishes himself, insisting she must be tired from her journey. He had bid her good night with a respectful nod and retreated to the second bedroom, closing the door firmly behind him. She was married to a stranger in a strange land, and yet somehow she felt safer than she had in months. Maybe it was the solid walls of this little house, or the knowledge that there was no debt hanging over her head, or the quiet certainty in Ashton's voice when he promised to earn her trust. Whatever it was, Katherine felt the tight knot of anxiety in her chest loosen just a fraction. The next morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed quickly in one of her old dresses, knowing she needed to save the work clothes for actual work, and emerged to find Ashton setting breakfast on the table. "Good morning," he said. "I hope I did not wake you." "I am used to rising early." "Good morning. It smells wonderful." Katherine took a seat and accepted the tin cup of coffee he poured for her. It was strong and bitter, nothing like the delicate tea she was used to, but it was hot and bracing. They ate in companionable silence, and then Ashton cleared his throat. "I thought maybe today I could show you around the ranch properly if you are feeling up to it. Introduce you to the animals, show you how things work. Only if you want to, of course. If you would rather rest or settle in, that is fine too." "I would like to see everything," Katherine said. "I need to learn. I do not want to be useless." "You are not useless," Ashton said firmly, "but I appreciate your willingness to learn. Some things will be different from what you are used to, but you will catch on quick. I can tell you are smart." They spent the morning walking the property, and Ashton explained everything with patient detail. The chickens needed to be fed and watered, their eggs collected each day. The cattle needed to be checked regularly, moved between pastures. The horses required daily care. There was a vegetable garden plot waiting to be planted, water to be hauled from the creek, endless repairs and maintenance that kept the ranch running. Katherine felt overwhelmed by it all, but also strangely exhilarated. Here was purpose, tangible work that mattered. Not embroidery that would sit in a drawer or social calls that served no real function. This was survival, was building something real. "Can you ride?" Ashton asked as they stood by the corral, watching the horses. "I took lessons as a girl," Katherine admitted. "Side saddle in a park. I suspect that is not what you mean. Might be a good idea for you to learn to ride properly out here. Distances are long, and sometimes you need to get somewhere quick. I have a gentle mare that would be good for you to learn on." Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Ashton would wake before dawn to tend to the most urgent chores, then make breakfast. Katherine would help with the animals, learning to scatter feed for the chickens, collect eggs without getting pecked, milk the cow that Ashton had not mentioned owning until she met the placid creature. Ashton taught her to ride astride, which felt scandalous at first, but soon proved practical and freeing. He showed her how to shoot a rifle, insisting she needed to know how to protect herself if anything ever happened while he was out on the range. In the evenings, they would sit together at the table, and Katherine would read aloud from the few books Ashton owned while he worked on tack repairs or other small tasks. He was not much for reading himself, but he seemed to enjoy listening to her voice, and she found she liked having an audience. They talked, slowly and carefully at first, then with growing ease. Ashton told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about losing his parents to fever when he was 17, about drifting west in search of something he could not quite name. Katherine talked about her childhood in Boston, about her mother dying when she was young, about her father's slow decline after his business failures. "I was angry at him for a long time," she confessed one night, "for leaving me in such a position. But I think he was just lost and could not find his way back." "People make mistakes," Ashton said quietly. "Does not mean they do not love us." Trust built slowly between them, in small moments and quiet gestures. Ashton always asked before entering a room she was in, always respected her space and boundaries. Katherine started making small changes to the house, adding wildflowers to the table, rearranging things to be more efficient. Ashton praised every change, even the ones that clearly puzzled him. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after her arrival, a sudden storm rolled in from the mountains. Ashton was out checking fence line, and Katherine was alone in the house when the sky turned black and the wind began to howl. She had never experienced a plain storm, had not realized how violent they could be. Thunder crashed so loud it shook the windows, and lightning split the sky in jagged forks of white fire. She found herself frightened in a way she had not been since those first desperate days after her father's death. The storm felt malevolent, personal, like it was trying to tear apart this fragile new life she was building. She paced the main room, jumping at every crack of thunder, worrying about Ashton out there somewhere in the violence. The door burst open and he stumbled in, soaked to the skin and breathing hard. "Are you all right?" he asked immediately, water dripping from his hat brim. "I am fine. I was worried about you. Storm came up fast. I am sorry I was not here when it started." He peeled off his wet coat and hung it by the door, then moved to start a fire in the hearth. His hands were shaking, whether from cold or something else. Katherine could not tell. "Let me help you," she said, bringing him a towel and the spare blanket from his room. "You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death." "Yes, madam." He disappeared into his room and emerged a few minutes later in dry clothes, his hair toweling roughly and standing up in all directions. Despite everything, Katherine almost smiled at the sight. The storm raged outside, but inside the fire was beginning to warm the room. Katherine made coffee and they sat together on the bench near the hearth, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. "I hate storms," Ashton said suddenly. "Always have. Makes me feel like a coward being scared of weather." "It is not cowardly to be afraid of something that could kill you," Katherine said. "I was terrified while you were out there." He looked at her, surprise in his amber eyes. "You were, of course. What if you had been struck by lightning or thrown from your horse? What if something happened to you? I would not know how to manage everything here on my own, and besides—" She trailed off, not quite ready to finish the thought. "Besides what?" "Besides, I have grown accustomed to having you around," Katherine admitted. "I would miss you." The smile that spread across Ashton's face was like sunrise, transforming his usually serious features. "I would miss you too," he said. "I have gotten used to having you here. The house feels like a home now, not just a place to sleep." They sat there as the storm slowly passed, moving east toward the mountains. The rain gentled, the thunder grew distant, and the evening sun broke through the clouds in shafts of golden light that painted the valley in shades of amber and rose. "Katherine." Ashton said her name carefully, as though testing the weight of it. He usually called her madam, maintaining formality even after weeks of living together. "Yes. Would it be all right if I held your hand?" It was such a simple question, so earnestly asked, that Katherine felt her heart squeeze. This man who could break horses and wrestle cattle and survive in this harsh land was asking permission to hold her hand as though it were the most precious gift she could give. She reached out and placed her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, his fingers strong and gentle as they closed around hers. They sat like that until full dark fell, not speaking, just being together, and Katherine felt something shift fundamentally inside her. This was not just survival anymore, not just a practical arrangement. This was the beginning of something real. Summer deepened, and with it their partnership. Katherine learned to work alongside Ashton, her soft city hands developing calluses of their own. She got better at riding, at shooting, at reading the weather and the land. She planted the garden and tended it carefully, taking pride in the first green shoots that pushed through the soil. She learned to cook the simple, hearty meals that Ashton needed to fuel his long days of physical labor. She was not always successful, burned plenty of dinners and ruined plenty of bread, but Ashton never complained. He ate everything she put in front of him with gratitude. They touched more often now. Small things. His hand at her back as they walked, her fingers brushing his as she handed him tools, standing close together as they worked on shared tasks. Each touch was a question and an answer, a building of intimacy that felt natural and right. One evening in late July, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. It had been a good day. The cattle were healthy, the garden was thriving, and they had worked together to repair a section of the barn roof that had been damaged in another storm. "I have been thinking," Ashton said, his voice quiet in the gathering twilight. "That proxy marriage we did through the letters, it is legal and all, but it does not feel complete somehow. I was wondering if maybe you would want to get married again, properly, with the circuit preacher when he comes through next month. Have a real ceremony. Nothing fancy, but something to mark this as real." Katherine considered the question. A few months ago, she would have seen it as just another formality, another step in a practical arrangement. But now, looking at this man who had kept every promise he made, who treated her with respect and kindness, who made her laugh and made her feel safe, she found she wanted the ceremony. Wanted to stand before witnesses and claim him as hers. "I would like that very much," she said. The smile he gave her could have lit the darkness. "Really? You are sure?" "I am sure. You have more than earned my trust, Ashton. You have earned much more than that." "What do you mean?" Katherine took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I mean that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just an arrangement for me. I care about you. Deeply. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I worry about you when you are out working. I think about you when we are apart. I do not know if that is love yet, but it feels like it could be." Ashton turned to her, and in the fading light she could see emotion working in his face. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough. "I have been wanting to for weeks now, but I did not want to presume." "Yes," Katherine breathed. "Please." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, and pressed his lips to hers. It was a gentle kiss, tender and questioning, and Katherine felt warmth spread through her entire body. She kissed him back, her hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palm. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ashton rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I have loved you since you stepped off that stagecoach looking terrified but trying so hard to be brave. You are the strongest person I have ever met, and the kindest, and I do not deserve you, but I will spend every day trying to." "You do deserve me," Katherine said firmly. "And I love you too. I did not think I could, did not think I had it in me after everything that happened back east, but you made it safe to feel again." They kissed again, deeper this time, and Katherine felt the last walls around her heart crumble. She was done being afraid, done holding back. This man, this life, this was what she wanted. Not what she had settled for, but what she genuinely chose. That night, after more kisses on the porch under the stars, Katherine took Ashton's hand and led him to her bedroom. Their bedroom now, she supposed, though they would have to figure out the logistics of that. They lay together on top of the quilt, fully clothed, just holding each other and talking in whispers until they both fell asleep tangled together. The weeks leading up to the circuit preacher's arrival were busy and happy. Word spread that Ashton Palmer was finally marrying his mail-order bride properly, and neighbors that Katherine had barely met came by with gifts and offers of help. There was Martha Jenkins from the next ranch over, a weathered woman in her 50s who brought a beautiful lace tablecloth and took Katherine under her wing, teaching her the finer points of frontier housekeeping. There was Tom and Sarah Rodriguez, who ran sheep on the land to the south, a young couple with 3 small children who filled the usually quiet ranch with laughter and chaos for an afternoon. There was old Jacob Miller, who lived alone in a cabin by the river and brought a hand-carved wooden bowl as a gift, his gnarled hand still steady enough for fine work. Katherine realized with some surprise that she was becoming part of a community, that she belonged here in a way she had never quite belonged in Boston society. These people did not care about her pedigree or her manners or her embroidery. They cared that she worked hard, that she treated people fairly, that she was a good partner to Ashton. The criteria for belonging were different here, and she found she preferred them. The day of the ceremony dawned clear and beautiful. The circuit preacher, a jovial man named Reverend Thompson who covered a territory of hundreds of miles on his patient mule, arrived at noon. Neighbors gathered in the yard, more people than Katherine had realized lived within visiting distance. Martha Jenkins had helped her alter one of her old Boston dresses, the best one she had, adding some lace and updating the style. She felt pretty for the first time in months, and the way Ashton stared at her when she emerged from the house confirmed it. He wore new clothes too, or new to him anyway, bought from the mercantile. A proper suit coat and vest, a string tie, his hair neatly trimmed and his face freshly shaved. He looked like a different person, almost uncomfortably formal, but when he smiled at her, it was the same Ashton she had grown to love. They stood together in front of the preacher with the mountains as their backdrop and the whole community as their witnesses. Reverend Thompson spoke about partnership and commitment, about building a life together on faith and hard work. Katherine barely heard the words. She was too focused on Ashton, on the way he held her hand so carefully, on the love and promise in his eyes. "I, Ashton Palmer, take you, Katherine Bennett, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said when prompted, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to be faithful and true, to work beside you to build our life together, to earn your trust every single day for as long as I live." Katherine felt tears slip down her cheeks as she spoke her own vows. "I, Katherine Bennett, take you, Ashton Palmer, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, support you, and stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to be your partner in all things, to build a home and a life with you, to trust you with my heart." They exchanged simple gold bands, another thing Ashton had bought in secret, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ashton kissed her deeply while the crowd cheered and whistled. The rest of the day was a blur of celebration. Tables had been set up in the yard, and the neighbors had brought food enough for a feast. There was music, someone producing a fiddle and another a harmonica, and Katherine found herself dancing with Ashton, with Tom Rodriguez, with old Jacob Miller, with everyone who asked. She was breathless and happy, spinning in the summer sunlight, feeling more alive than she could remember feeling in years. As evening fell and the party began to break up, neighbors headed home to their own ranches and chores. Martha Jenkins pulled Katherine aside. "You did good, girl," she said gruffly. "Ashton is a good man, one of the best. You two will do just fine together." "Thank you," Katherine said, "for everything, for welcoming me." "This land is hard on women," Martha said seriously. "We have to look out for each other. You need anything, anything at all, you come to me. And when things get tough, because they will, you remember that the hard times pass. What matters is who you have beside you when they come." Finally, they were alone. The yard was empty, the sun had set, and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Ashton took Katherine's hand and led her into the house, into their bedroom. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly, closing the door behind them. "A little," Katherine admitted, "but mostly I am just happy." "Me too." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "We can go slow, we have all the time in the world." But Katherine found she did not want to go slow anymore. She had been patient and careful for so long, afraid to want anything, afraid to reach for happiness. Ashton had shown her it was safe to try, safe to open her heart. Now she wanted to open everything else too. Their wedding night was tender and awkward and perfect. They fumbled and laughed and discovered each other with gentle hands and whispered words. Ashton was patient and careful, making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted this. Katherine found courage she did not know she possessed, asking for what she wanted, showing him without words what felt good. When they finally came together fully, she felt complete in a way she had not known was possible. Afterward, they lay tangled together, skin against skin, hearts beating in tandem. Ashton traced patterns on her back with his fingertips, and Katherine pressed kisses to his collarbone. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "My wife, my Katherine." "I love you too," she whispered back. "My husband, my Ashton." Life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. They shared a bed now, shared their bodies and their hearts with growing confidence and joy. The work continued, the endless cycle of chores and maintenance that kept the ranch running, but it felt different now. They were building something together, not just surviving but creating a future. Late summer brought challenges. A drought settled over the valley, and the creek ran lower than Ashton had ever seen it. They hauled water for the garden, for the animals, rationing every drop. Katherine learned to do laundry with the bare minimum of water, to cook meals that did not require soaking beans overnight. They watched the sky anxiously for rain clouds, celebrated every brief shower that passed through. One of the cows got sick, a valuable young heifer that Ashton had been counting on for breeding. He spent 2 days and nights in the barn with her, trying everything he knew to help. Katherine brought him meals and coffee, sat with him during the long watches, held his hand when the heifer finally died despite everything. "That is a hard loss," she said as they buried the animal at the edge of the property. "It is," Ashton agreed, his voice heavy, "but we will manage." "We have to." But Katherine could see the worry in his eyes, the calculations he was running about money and winter feed and whether they could afford to replace the heifer. That night, she brought up something she had been thinking about. "I could take in sewing," she said as they lay in bed. "Martha mentioned that there is no one in town who does alterations or makes dresses. I am good at that, and it would bring in some extra money." Ashton was quiet for a moment. "I do not want you to think you have to do that. I can provide for us." "I know you can," Katherine said patiently. "But we are partners, remember. This is our ranch, our life. If I can help bring in money, why would not I? Besides, I miss sewing. It was one of the few things I was genuinely good at back in Boston." "If you are sure," Ashton said slowly. "If it is something you want to do, not just something you feel obligated to do, I am sure." So Katherine became the seamstress for Gunnison and the surrounding ranches. Women brought her fabric and patterns, asked her to make dresses for special occasions or alter store-bought clothes to fit better. She discovered she had an eye for design, could look at a woman and know what styles would flatter her, what colors would bring out her features. The work was satisfying, and the money, while not a fortune, helped ease the tight worry lines around Ashton's eyes. Fall came, painting the mountains in gold and crimson, and with it the hard work of preparing for winter. They harvested the garden, Katherine learning to can, and preserve the vegetables under Martha Jenkins' patient instruction. Ashton and Tom Rodriguez worked together to bring the cattle down from the high pastures, long days in the saddle that left Ashton exhausted and sore. Katherine learned to make poultices for his aching muscles, to have hot baths ready when he came in, to rub liniment into his shoulders while he groaned with relief. One evening in October, as the first frost touched the valley, Katherine realized her monthly courses were late. She said nothing at first, not wanting to raise hopes or cause worry. But as the days passed, and her body continued to change in small ways, nausea in the mornings and unusual fatigue, she began to allow herself to believe. She told Ashton one night as they sat by the fire, his arm around her shoulders. "I think I might be with child," she said softly. He went very still. "Truly, I am not certain, but all the signs point to it. My courses are 3 weeks late. I have been sick in the mornings and I feel different somehow." Ashton turned to her and she saw tears shining in his eyes. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "I think so, yes." He kissed her then, deeply and tenderly, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "You have made me the happiest man alive," he whispered. "I did not think I could love you more, but knowing you are carrying our child, it is like my heart is going to burst." Winter came hard and early that year. Snow fell in November and kept falling, piling up in drifts against the barn, covering the pastures in white silence. They settled into the close quarters of winter life, Ashton doing chores in the bitter cold, while Katherine kept the house warm and prepared meals and worked on sewing projects by lamplight. Her pregnancy progressed, her belly swelling with their growing child. Ashton was simultaneously thrilled and terrified, reading every book about childbirth and infant care that he could get his hands on. He was constantly worried about her, making sure she did not lift anything heavy, that she got enough rest, that she was eating properly. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Katherine said with amusement as he fussed over her for the 100th time. "I know, but I cannot help worrying. You are carrying the most precious thing in the world." "Two precious things," Katherine corrected. "The baby and me." "You especially," Ashton said seriously, pulling her into his arms. "I could not bear it if anything happened to you." Martha Jenkins came to visit regularly as the pregnancy advanced, checking on Katherine and giving practical advice. "First babies take their time," she said. "Do not fret when your due date comes and goes. The baby will come when it is good and ready." She was right. Katherine's due date in early March came and went with no sign of labor. Ashton became increasingly anxious, hovering so much that Katherine finally sent him to work in the barn just for some space. He had just returned to the house, stamping snow from his boots, when Katherine felt the first contraction grip her belly. "I think it is time," she said, trying to keep her voice calm even though her heart was racing. Martha had told them what to do, had left supplies and instructions. Ashton sent for her immediately, their nearest neighbor's teenage son riding through the snow to fetch her. Then he helped Katherine into bed and sat with her, holding her hand through the contractions that came with increasing frequency and intensity. Martha arrived 3 hours later, bustling in with her no-nonsense efficiency. "All right, let us see what we have here," she said, examining Katherine. "You are doing fine, girl. This is going to take a while longer, so settle in." The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. It was harder than anything Katherine had ever experienced, waves of pain that seemed impossible to endure. But Ashton was there every moment, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement when she was sure she could not go on. "You can do this," he said over and over. "You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer, my love, just a little longer." Finally, as dawn light began to filter through the window, Martha said, "All right, Katherine, next contraction you push with everything you have got." Katherine bore down with strength she did not know she possessed, and suddenly there was a release, a rush, and the thin, outraged wail of a newborn baby filled the room. "It is a boy," Martha announced, wrapping the squalling infant in a clean blanket. "A healthy boy with a good pair of lungs on him." She placed the baby in Katherine's arms, and Katherine looked down at the tiny red face, the shock of dark hair, the waving fists, and felt her heart expand to encompass this new life. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Hello, sweetheart." Ashton was crying openly, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. "He is perfect," he choked out. "You are perfect. Thank you, Katherine. Thank you for this gift." They named him Andrew Bennett Palmer after Katherine's father. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, and watching Ashton with him made Katherine fall in love with her husband all over again. He was so gentle with Andrew, so patient during the endless night wakings and fussy periods. He would walk the floor with the baby for hours, singing off-key lullabies, narrating everything he was doing. "Now we are going to check on the horses, Andrew. See, that is Dusty, he is a good old boy. And that is Sunshine, she is your mama's horse." Spring came finally, melting the snow and turning the valley green again. Katherine strapped Andrew to her back in a sling Martha had shown her how to make and worked in the garden, teaching her son about growing things even though he was too young to understand. Ashton would come in from the fields to find them there, his wife and son in the sunshine, and have to stop and just marvel at the life they had built. "I never thought I could have this," he confessed one evening as they sat on the porch, Andrew asleep in Katherine's arms. "A home, a family, someone who loves me. It seemed like something that happened to other people, not to me." "I never thought I could have it either," Katherine said. "I thought my life was over when my father died, but it was just beginning. I just did not know it yet." They kissed over their sleeping son's head, tasting like hope and forever. The years that followed were not always easy. Droughts came and went, cattle prices fluctuated, there were injuries and illnesses and setbacks. But through it all, Katherine and Ashton faced everything together. The ranch slowly prospered under their joint management. Katherine's sewing business grew, and eventually she had enough saved to buy a proper sewing machine, a marvel that made her work faster and more professional. When Andrew was 3, Katherine got pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to do, and the labor, while still difficult, was shorter. They welcomed a daughter they named Emma Grace Palmer, a tiny, perfect little girl who looked exactly like Katherine. 2 years later, another son arrived, James Robert Palmer, completing their family. The little house was bursting at the seams with children and love and noise, and Ashton built an addition, adding 2 more rooms so everyone could have space. Andrew grew tall and serious like his father, already helping with ranch chores by the time he was 6. Emma was wild and fearless, constantly covered in dirt, more interested in horses than dolls. James was the baby, spoiled a bit by everyone, sunny and charming even as a toddler. Katherine and Ashton grew gray together, their faces weathering under the intense Colorado sun, their bodies bearing the marks of hard work and hard living. But they never stopped reaching for each other, never stopped finding joy in each other's company. Their love, which had started as a desperate gamble, had become the foundation of everything. One summer evening, when Andrew was 12, Emma 10, and James 8, the whole family sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were arguing good-naturedly about something, the way siblings do, and Ashton pulled Katherine close against his side. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Answering that advertisement, coming west to marry a stranger." Katherine thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off that stage coach so many years ago, about everything she had lost and everything she had gained. She thought about the life she might have had in Boston, genteel poverty and dependence on relatives' grudging charity, never quite belonging, never quite enough. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "Coming here, marrying you, it was the best decision I ever made." "You kept your promise, Ashton. You earned my trust daily, and then you earned my love, and you have kept earning it every day since. I could not imagine a better life than this one we have built together." "Neither could I," Ashton said, kissing her temple. "Neither could I." The sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The children's argument dissolved into laughter. Somewhere in the barn, a horse whinnied. The creek sang its eternal song in the valley below. And Katherine and Ashton sat together, hands clasped, hearts intertwined, grateful for the leap of faith that had brought them together and the daily choice to keep choosing each other. Years continued to pass in the way they do, measured in seasons and harvests, in children growing and learning and becoming themselves. Andrew took naturally to ranching, learning everything his father could teach him about cattle and horses, about reading the land and the weather. By the time he was 16, he was doing a man's work and doing it well. Emma surprised no one when she announced at age 14 that she wanted to learn to train horses professionally. Ashton built her a round pen and helped her start working with the young horses, gentling them with patience and intuition. She had a gift for it, a way with animals that went beyond simple skill into something almost magical. James turned out to be the scholar of the family, always with his nose in a book, asking questions about everything. When the circuit teacher started coming through Gunnison regularly, James was his star pupil. Katherine nurtured this carefully, remembering her own education, making sure James had access to books and learning. The ranch had prospered beyond Ashton's early dreams. They had good land, good stock, and a reputation for fair dealing that brought customers from all over the territory. Katherine's sewing business had evolved into something more, and she now had 2 women from town working for her, fulfilling orders not just for local customers, but for fancy stores in Denver. They were not rich, would never be rich by the standards of Katherine's Boston childhood, but they were secure and comfortable and happy. The little house had grown over the years, additions upon additions, until it was a proper ranch house with enough room for their family and occasional guests. Martha Jenkins passed away the winter that Andrew turned 18, and Katherine grieved for the woman who had been her first friend in Colorado, her guide and mentor. At the funeral, several other women pulled Katherine aside, telling her that she had become what Martha was, the woman others looked to for help and wisdom. "When I came here with my husband 2 years ago, you were the first person to welcome me," a young woman named Sarah told her. "You brought us food and helped me learn to manage in this place. You did for me what Martha did for you, and I will never forget it." Katherine realized with some surprise that she had lived in Colorado longer now than she had lived in Boston. This was her home, these people her community. The frightened city girl she had been was gone, replaced by a woman who could birth calves and break horses, who could shoot straight and ride hard, who could run a business and raise children and help her neighbors. She had become someone she would not have recognized all those years ago, and she was proud of that transformation. The biggest change came when Andrew was 20 and fell in love with the new school teacher, a sweet girl named Rebecca Shaw who had come from St. Louis. Katherine watched her eldest son court Rebecca with a seriousness that reminded her so much of Ashton, and she had to smile at how the pattern repeated. "He is going to ask her to marry him," Ashton said one evening, watching Andrew ride off toward town for the 3rd time that week. "I know," Katherine said. "How do you feel about it?" "Old," Ashton admitted with a laugh, "but happy. She is a good girl and she clearly makes him happy. That is all I ever wanted for him." The wedding was held at the ranch, and Katherine found herself standing in the same spot where she and Ashton had exchanged vows over 20 years earlier. She cried during the ceremony, emotional in a way that surprised her. "What is wrong?" Ashton asked later as they prepared for bed. "Nothing is wrong," Katherine said. I am just thinking about beginnings and endings, about how our children are starting their own lives now, about how time passes so quickly." "We still have lots of time," Ashton said, pulling her into his arms. "I plan on growing old and gray with you, watching all our children build their own lives, spoiling grandchildren." "Grandchildren," Katherine repeated, liking the sound of it. They got their first grandchild less than a year later, when Rebecca gave birth to a little girl they named Catherine Martha, after both her grandmothers. Holding the baby, seeing Andrew's joy in fatherhood, Catherine felt the beautiful symmetry of life continuing. Emma, ever independent, announced at 19 that she was not interested in marriage, that she wanted to build her horse training business instead. "I know that is probably disappointing," she said to her parents, her chin jutting defiantly. "Why would it be disappointing?" Catherine asked. "You are following your passion, making your own way. That is exactly what your father and I did. We are proud of you." Emma's face crumpled with relief. "Some of the ladies in town have been saying things about how I am going to end up alone, and it is unnatural for a woman not to want a husband." "Some people will always have opinions about how others should live their lives," Ashton said firmly. "But your life is yours to live, daughter. You make your own choices, and your mother and I will support you." But life had its own plans for Emma. At 21, she traveled to Denver to buy breeding stock and met a rancher named Daniel Cooper who shared her passion for horses. He did not try to change her or control her, but instead became her partner in every sense of the word. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony and built their own ranch on land adjoining the Palmer property, breeding and training horses that became famous throughout Colorado. James, true to his scholarly nature, won a scholarship to the University of Denver when he was 18. It was a proud and bittersweet day when Ashton and Katherine accompanied him to the city, helping him settle into his small dormitory room. "I will be back every summer to help on the ranch," James promised, "and I will write every week." "We know you will," Katherine said, hugging him tight. "Go learn everything you can. Make the most of this opportunity." Watching their youngest son walk into that university building, Katherine thought about her own father, about his lost opportunities and failed dreams. James would have the education and chances her father never got to give her, and that felt like a kind of redemption. The years rolled on, bringing grandchildren and gray hair, aching joints and deeper laughter lines around their eyes. Ashton eventually handed over most of the daily running of the ranch to Andrew, though he still went out to check cattle and mend fences, because he could not imagine not working. Katherine still sewed, though her eyes were not what they used to be and she had to stop when the light grew dim. She still kept a garden, though she had help with the heavy work now. She still read to Ashton in the evenings, his hearing not quite what it was but his enjoyment of her voice undiminished. They had been married nearly 35 years when Ashton had a bad fall from his horse. He broke his leg badly, and the doctor had to set it with pins. He recovered slowly, and afterward he walked with a slight limp that pained him in cold weather. It was their first real confrontation with mortality, with the fact that they were not young anymore, that their time was finite. "I am not ready to be old," Ashton confessed one night as Katherine helped him into bed, his leg still healing. "Neither am I," Katherine said, "but I suppose we do not get a choice about that part." "I worry about you," Ashton said, "about what will happen to you when I am gone." "Do not talk like that," Katherine said sharply. "You are not going anywhere for a long time yet. But when I do, eventually, I need to know you will be all right. The ranch is secure. Andrew will run it well. You will be taken care of financially. But I need to know you will be all right in yourself." Katherine looked at her husband, at the gray in his hair and the lines in his face, at the amber eyes that still looked at her with the same love they had held when she first stepped off that stagecoach. "If you go first," she said slowly, "I will grieve. I will miss you every moment of every day, but I will be all right because you taught me how to be strong, how to survive, how to keep going even when things are hard. And I will have our children and grandchildren, and I will have the life we built together. Part of you will always be with me." "And if you go first?" Ashton asked. "Then you will do the same," Katherine said firmly. "You will grieve and miss me and keep going because that is what we do. We keep going." But it turned out they both had more time than they feared. Ashton's leg healed, though he did indeed walk with a permanent limp. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, a boisterous party that filled the ranch house to bursting. James, now a professor of literature in Denver, gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice, made fresh every single day. Who showed us that real strength is gentleness, that real courage is vulnerability, that real success is measured in joy and family rather than dollars and status. We are who we are because of who you are together." That night, Katherine and Ashton sat alone on the porch long after everyone had gone home or to bed. The stars wheeled overhead, and the summer breeze carried the scent of Katherine's roses. 40 years, Ashton marveled. "Can you believe it? Sometimes it feels like 40 minutes and sometimes it feels like forever," Katherine said, "in the best way possible." "You remember that first day?" Ashton asked. "When you stepped off that stagecoach looking so scared?" "I was terrified," Katherine admitted. "Everything here was so foreign, so overwhelming, and you were this stranger I had committed my life to. I did not think I would ever feel safe again. But you do now." "I have felt safe with you since about 3 weeks after I arrived," Katherine said, "when you promised to earn my trust daily. That was when I knew I had made the right choice, even if I did not fully understand it yet." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, hearts beating in familiar rhythm. Somewhere in the valley, a coyote howled and one of Emma's horses answered with a whinny. The creek sang its eternal song. The wind whispered through the grass. "I would do it all again," Ashton said quietly. "Every moment, every struggle, every joy, all of it exactly the same as long as it ended with us here together." "So would I," Katherine agreed. "So would I." They were both in their 60s when the influenza epidemic swept through Colorado. It hit Gunnison hard, and Katherine found herself nursing half the town through the illness. She had experience now, had seen sickness and death, had learned healing arts from Martha Jenkins and other frontier women. She worked herself to exhaustion, going from house to house with remedies and comfort. Ashton helped as much as his aging body allowed, delivering supplies, checking on families, doing whatever needed doing. They were lucky, both of them staying healthy while so many fell ill. But luck could only hold so long. Andrew's wife Rebecca contracted the flu despite all precautions. Katherine nursed her through it, sitting by her bedside for 3 days and nights while Andrew paced and prayed. Rebecca survived, but it was a close thing, and the whole family breathed easier when she finally started to recover. The epidemic passed, as epidemics do, leaving grief and loss in its wake. They lost friends, people they had known for decades. But they also saw the way the community pulled together, the way people helped each other through the worst of it. It reminded Katherine of why she loved this place, these people, this life she had found. As they moved through their 60s and into their 70s, Katherine and Ashton slowed down but did not stop. They were blessed with good health for their age, still able to work and contribute even if they could not do everything they once had. The ranch now employed several hands, and Andrew had truly taken over management. But Ashton still consulted on major decisions and still went out to check on things when his leg allowed. Katherine had 11 grandchildren now, ranging in age from the eldest, Katherine Martha, who was already 17, down to the youngest, a baby boy that Emma and Daniel had just welcomed. She loved having them visit, loved the noise and chaos of young life filling the house. But she also loved when they left and she and Ashton had the house to themselves again, could return to their quiet routines and peaceful evenings. "We are ancient," Ashton joked one morning as he creaked out of bed, his joints protesting. "Speak for yourself," Katherine retorted, though she had to admit that her own body was not what it once was. Her hands ached from arthritis, making sewing difficult. Her back hurt if she worked in the garden too long. Her eyesight required thick spectacles now. But they were alive, they were together, and that was everything. The summer that Katherine turned 73, she and Ashton took a trip into town for supplies, something they had done 1,000 times before. They were in the mercantile, Katherine examining fabric while Ashton chatted with the proprietor, when suddenly he stopped mid-sentence. "Ashton!" Katherine looked up to see him clutching his chest, his face gone pale. He collapsed before she could reach him. The next few hours were a blur of panic and prayer as the doctor examined him, as they got him home to bed, as they waited to see if he would survive what the doctor confirmed was a heart attack. He lived, but the doctor was grave. "His heart is weak," he told Katherine and the children who had gathered. "He needs complete rest, no stress, no physical exertion. Even with that, I cannot promise you much time." Ashton was furious at being bedridden, chafed at the restrictions. "I am not an invalid," he insisted. "I have work to do." "The work will get done," Andrew said firmly. "Right now your work is to rest and get better." But they all knew he would not get better, not really. This was the beginning of the end, the thing they had both known would come eventually but had not wanted to face. Katherine rarely left his side in the weeks that followed. She read to him, talked with him, sat in comfortable silence holding his hand. Their children visited daily, bringing the grandchildren to see him, filling the room with noise and life. One evening in late August, when the shadows were growing long and the summer was thinking about turning to fall, Ashton squeezed Katherine's hand. "I need to say something," he said, his voice weak but clear. "You do not need to say anything," Katherine said, tears already starting. She knew what was coming, could feel it in her bones. "I do," Ashton insisted. "I need you to know that you made my life worth living. Before you, I was just existing, just going through the motions. But you gave me purpose and joy and love beyond anything I ever imagined. These 45 years with you have been the greatest gift I could have received." "You gave me the same thing," Katherine whispered. "You saved me, Ashton. In every way a person can be saved. I love you so much." "I know," he said, smiling at her. "I have always known. And I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will not stop living when I am gone. Promise me you will keep working in your garden and sewing your dresses and telling stories to the grandchildren. Promise me you will find joy and keep going. Can you promise me that?" "I promise," Katherine said, though the words hurt to say, "but you have to promise me something too." "What is that?" "Promise me you will wait for me," she said. "Wherever we go next, whatever comes after this, promise me you will be there waiting." "I promise," Ashton said. "I will wait forever if I have to." He died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep with Katherine beside him. She woke at dawn to find him still and cold, his hand still in hers, and the grief that crashed over her was like a physical blow. She sat there for a long time, just holding his hand, remembering every moment they had shared, grateful for every single day they had been given. The funeral was huge, the whole community turning out to pay respects to a man who had been a pillar of the county for over 4 decades. People told stories about his honesty, his kindness, his willingness to help anyone who needed it. Katherine listened to them talk about her husband and felt a fierce pride alongside her grief. He had been a good man, a truly good man, and he had been hers. The weeks after were hard. Katherine had meant what she promised, intended to keep living, but some days it felt impossible. The house was so quiet without him, the bed so empty. She would turn to tell him something and remember he was not there. She would cook his favorite meal before remembering he would not be there to eat it. But she had her children and grandchildren, and they rallied around her with love and support. Andrew and his family moved into the main house to keep her company. Emma visited nearly every day, bringing news and gossip and life. James came home from Denver, taking a leave from the university to be with his mother. Slowly, painfully, Katherine learned to live without Ashton. She kept her promise, tending her garden and sewing and telling stories. She found she could talk about him without crying, could remember the joy without being swallowed by the loss. She discovered that grief and gratitude could exist together, that she could miss him desperately while still being grateful for the life they had shared. Katherine lived another 7 years after Ashton died. She saw more grandchildren born, saw her eldest grandchildren marry and start families of their own. She saw the ranch continue to prosper under Andrew's management, saw Emma's horse breeding business become known throughout the West, saw James publish a book of poetry that included several pieces about growing up on the Colorado frontier. She grew frailer as the years passed, her body slowly giving out. But her mind stayed sharp and her spirit remained strong. She was a matriarch now, the grandmother everyone came to for advice and stories. She told them about Boston and the journey west, about the frightened girl who stepped off a stagecoach and the cowboy who promised to earn her trust daily. She told them about building a life through hard work and faith and love. On a spring morning in her 81st year, Katherine woke feeling different somehow. The pain that had become her constant companion was gone, replaced by a strange lightness. She lay in bed watching the sunrise paint her bedroom in shades of pink and gold, and she knew with absolute certainty that today was the day. She called her children to her, one by one, and told them goodbye. She told them she loved them, that she was proud of them, that they should take care of each other. She asked them to scatter her ashes next to Ashton's grave under the cottonwood tree by the creek. "Do not be sad," she told them. "I have had the most wonderful life, more than I ever dreamed possible, and I am ready now. I am ready to see him again." As the afternoon sun slanted through the window, Katherine closed her eyes and let go. Her last thought was of Ashton, of his amber eyes and gentle smile, of the way he used to hold her hand. She could almost feel him reaching for her, hear his voice saying her name. She had kept her promise to keep living. Now it was time for him to keep his promise to wait for her. And in the warm, golden light of that spring afternoon, Katherine Bennett Palmer slipped peacefully away, secure in the knowledge that she had lived fully and loved well, that she had found her home and her heart in the wild Colorado mountains, that the frightened mail-order bride and the lonely cowboy had built something beautiful together that would echo through the generations long after they were both gone. The family buried her next to Ashton under the cottonwood tree, just as she had asked. Her gravestone was simple: Katherine Bennett Palmer, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. But her children added one more line, words that Ashton had spoken on their wedding day and lived every day of their marriage. "She earned my trust daily." The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, Palmer land worked by Palmer hands. And every spring, the cottonwood tree by the creek would bloom, its branches reaching toward the endless Colorado sky, standing as a living monument to the love between a frightened bride and a lonely cowboy who took a chance on each other and built a legacy that would never be forgotten.